The wind does not speak any more. It moans, low, bitter, endless, scraping its knuckles against the stones of a dying village. Through the ruined teeth of Senwick's church steeple, it wails like a widow in mourning, pulling ash-coloured snow through empty lanes where no feet walk and no laughter lingers. The bell above is mute. Its voice, once the pulse of this place, has been cut. The clapper was taken months ago, melted perhaps, traded for something that never came. Now it swings only with the storm, a hollow pendulum, a silent witness to the unravelling below. In the square, the snow is not clean. It is smudged with soot and trampled straw, clotted with the remnants of what once passed for a market. The stalls are gone, the carts overturned. Even the crows that once gathered have grown lean, their wings dragging like cloaks too heavy with sorrow. At the far end of the village, beyond the broken trough and the frost-bitten hedges, a child's rope swing hangs from a skeletal tree. It creaks in the wind, back and forth, like the breath of something half-dead, half-dreaming. Once, a girl in green used to sing there, her voice brighter than midsummer. Now the seat is covered in frost, and the song has no mouth to remember it. Inside one of the remaining cottages, timber-framed, bowed from age and rot, the hearth is cold. Its stones are dusted white, the last ash long since blown away. A woman sits before it, her back curved like a question mark, a wooden bowl in her lap. It is empty. She does not cry. Hunger has dried the tears from her long ago. She runs her thumb along the bowl's rim. It was carved by her grandfather in the time of plenty, a time of barley loaves and lentil stew, of steamy kitchens and oil lamps glowing like suns in small rooms. That time has drowned, and all that remains is the bowl and the boy in the corner. Her son is sick. The cough shakes his chest like a bird trying to escape its cage. His skin is pale, almost blue, his linen shift clinging to the knobs of his ribs. He watches her with glassy eyes, not asking, not hoping, just watching, as if wondering whether she is still real or already a ghost. On the floor, the rats come and go without fear. They are not pests here, they are cohabitants. They squeak softly as they pass, weaving through the straw, pausing to sniff the cracks where warmth once lived. One stops at the boy's bare foot, nudges it, then moves on. The boy does not flinch. Outside, the church looms over Senwick like a corpse that refuses burial. Its stone walls are cracked, its stained glass shattered into teeth. No candles are lit within. The altar lies bare, its cloth eaten by damp. Where once hymns rose like incense, now only the wind whispers psalms no tongue remembers. No one calls meetings any more. The reeve disappeared weeks ago, vanished into the woods with his ledger and his law. Some say he fled, others say that hunger swallowed him, but the laws he kept are gone too. There is no judgment now, no trial, only barter, betrayal, and silence. They no longer bury the dead with ceremony. There is no priest, no chant, no shroud. A hole is dug, shallow as a sigh, and the body laid down, wrapped in sackcloth, eyes unclosed. Names are not spoken. They cost too much, and it is the blacksmith who digs. He comes each day to the edge of the square, dragging behind him a wooden staff wound with dried herbs, rosemary, sage, lavender. Their scent is faint now, but still he carries them, as if memory itself might stave off the rot. Once, his arms were thick as hammers, his anvil rang with iron songs. He made hinges for the chapel, nails for the manor, bridles for the knights. But the forge is cold now, the bellows torn, the coals long dead. His tools were traded one by one. A horseshoe for a cabbage, a rasp for a candle stub. The last to go was the hammer. He kept the handle out of reverence, perhaps, but the head was taken to melt down into arrowheads by men who no longer answer to any lord. He walks slowly, back bent, face hidden beneath a soot-stained hood. Where his boots once gleamed with polish, now they leak water, each step leaving a dark imprint in the snow. But he does not falter. The dead do not wait today. He stops near the swing. A girl was found nearby, maybe 7, maybe 9. Number 1 knew her name. She did not belong here. She had wandered in weeks ago, silent, with frost in her hair and one shoe missing. The villagers had shared a crust of bread. The woman by the hearth had given her a blanket. But hunger is a beast, with no patience, and yesterday she simply stopped breathing. The blacksmith kneels beside her body. He touches her forehead gently, brushing away the snow. Her lips are parted, her hands curled like petals. He whispers something, perhaps a prayer, perhaps her name, if he ever knew it. Then he begins to dig. The earth resists him. It is hard, frozen, bitter. His breath steams like smoke from a dying fire. The staff stands upright beside the hole, its herbs trembling in the wind like feathers on a broken wing. High above, the bell sways again. No sound, just motion, like a heart trying to remember how to beat. And all around, the village listens, not with ears, but with absence, with the hollow spaces where children used to play, where bread used to rise, where fire used to warm skin and soul alike. Senwick is not dead, not yet, but it is forgetting how to live. The mother, by the hearth, finally rises. She leaves the bowl on the stones. Her fingers twitch as if grasping something invisible. She walks slowly to her son, kneels, places a hand on his chest, still rising, still falling, still breathing. Outside, the grave is nearly done. The blacksmith wipes his brow, though no sweat comes in this cold. He looks to the tree. The swing still creaks, back and forth, back and forth. A lullaby for a village without dreams. And in that stillness, something shifts. Not hope, not yet, but a pause, a hush, as though the land itself waits, uncertain. What comes next is not clear, but beneath the snow, the earth remembers. And deep within the hearts of those who remain, the mother, the boy, the blacksmith, something faint begins to stir. Not a promise, but the ache of one. Fade into silence. Snow drifting. A candle flickering in a chapel window. And somewhere, just barely heard the beginning of another voice. A curl of candle smoke drifts into the night, swallowed by a sky as dark as unspoken grief. It seeps through the thatched roof like a final breath, lost to the wind. In the last window, still lit in Senwick, the flame trembles on a crooked sill, casting shadows that dance like memories across the wooden walls. The girl tending the candle is no older than 12. Her hands, raw from cold, are wrapped in strips of burlap, torn from what once was her mother's wedding veil. She ties them tightly, not for warmth, but for comfort, the way one might hold onto a lullaby they've long forgotten the words to. Her name is Alice, though no one has spoken it in days. She doesn't speak much either. Words take breath, and breath is precious now. Behind her, the silence is deep. It clings to the house like frost, coating everything, the hearth with its dead embers, the table where no bread has sat in weeks, and the corner where her younger brother sleeps beneath a torn wool cloak, twitching in fevered dreams. Their mother lies still beneath layers of damp fabric, her eyes closed, mouth slightly open, as if waiting for something that will never come. The candle crackles. Alice leans closer. It is the only living thing in the room that doesn't shiver. Each morning, the villagers perform the same unspoken ritual, a head count, a scan of the faces that remain. The blacksmith's son was the most recent to vanish. Found lying beneath the altar, his eyes open, staring at the ceiling where saints once danced in colored glass. They buried him without a prayer. There are no priests left to offer one. Some say it was a mercy. Others call it a relief. One less mouth, one more blanket to share. The thoughts arrive, unbidden, coated in guilt. But in Senwick now, mercy and guilt were the same face. Her brother coughs again, and Alice moves to him. She presses a wet cloth to his forehead. It smells faintly of mildew. He opens his eyes for a moment, lucid, and whispers, "Is it spring yet?" She cannot answer. To speak would be to lie. He was the one who went beyond the hill, into the bramble fields. He left 3 days ago, searching for roots, mushrooms, anything that might still grow in this cursed soil. He returned with a bruised turnip and a bloody gash across his thigh. He said nothing about the wound. Only later, when the fever came, did she understand the price he paid. Their father had vanished months earlier, a steward once respected, known for fair hands and steady books. When the famine thickened and the stores thinned, he went out one morning, saying he'd return by dusk. He never did. Some say he was killed for theft. Others say he traded his name for a different life, in another village. But Alice doesn't believe that. She knows the woods are full of graves that have no markers. The candle flickers again. She cups her hands around it, shielding it from the breath of the house. It is precious, not for light, but for meaning. Fire is memory. Fire is resistance. Even now, the village trades in silence now, in glances, in fragments of things that once held meaning. A cracked spindle exchanged for a wilted leek. A page torn from a psalter passed hand to hand, burned in pieces each night to keep away the frost. Even the priest, the last remaining voice of hope, no longer speaks of miracles. He whispers of penance, of passage, of purging, and sometimes not even that. No birds sing in Senwick. The sky is still. The air hangs heavy with the scent of rot and old bread. Even the dogs, once wild and lean, have vanished, hunted, eaten, or driven off. In the chapel, the crucifix leans askew, the Christ figure, blackened with soot. His eyes, carved wide, seem to plead for someone to look back. No one does. Alice goes to the window. She watches the snow fall. It lands without sound, covering the muddy street like a burial cloth. In the far distance, a light flickers, not fire, but moon on metal. She wonders if it is a signal or just the illusion of one. She presses her forehead to the cold glass and whispers the only thing she dares. "Please, not tonight." She turns to the corner where she hides her hoard. 3 shriveled apples, a crust of bread too hard to chew, and the last of their mother's honey, now crystallized in its jar. She takes none of it. She is saving it for something, though she does not know what there is movement outside. A figure, hunched and slow, passes by. Wrapped in wool, face hidden, they pause at the door, breathing. Then footsteps retreat. No knock, no words. Just the hush of someone deciding not to risk it. She watches them go. That night, the wind speaks. It presses against the door like a drunk at the tavern steps, searching for warmth. Alice adds another cloth to her brother's body, then returns to the candle. It's nearly gone now, wax pooling at the base like melting bones. She does not cry. There are no tears left, but she hums softly, something her mother once sang. The melody is broken, off-key, but the candle steadies, as if listening. She remembers the sound of festivals, the way the bells rang at harvest, the smell of roasted chestnuts, the echo of drums and laughter. That world is gone, buried beneath frost and silence, but not erased. Not yet. Somewhere in the village, a door slams, far off. A dog barks once, then silence again. Her brother stirs, mutters her name. She comes to him quickly, holds his hand. His skin is cold, but not yet fading. He smiles, barely, and murmurs, "You're still here." "I am," she answers, the words burning her throat. The candle flickers once more, then dies. But its scent remains, wax and wick and smoke, lingering like breath in a chapel long since abandoned. Alice does not move. She watches the smoke rise and fade into the rafters, and for a moment she imagines it will return. A wisp, a voice, a sign. She places her hand over her brother's chest. Still beating dot in the morning, they will count the living again. They will speak few words, trade fewer things. But tonight, beneath the hush of snow, a girl sings softly to a boy, in a village that has forgotten what songs are for. And somewhere, in the dark, the next candle waits. Ask ChatGPT morning comes, not with gold, but with a colorless hush, a blue-gray veil that seeps through the fog, more shadow than light. No sun breaks the sky above Senwick. Only the faintest suggestion of day arrives, reluctant and thin, like breath from a dying man. The frost lies heavy across the ground, clinging to rooftops and doorframes like ancient dust. No smoke rises from the chimneys now, not because the villagers have forgotten how to make fire, but because fire demands sacrifice, fuel, food, breath, and there is nothing left to burn that will warm more than a soul. In the heart of the square, the village well stands dry, its stones green with moss, its bucket rotting at the lip. The rope hangs limp, frayed and unraveling like the days themselves. No one draws water here. The river has retreated into the woods, pulling its blessing far from those it once sustained. The well stands not as a source of life, but as a monument to longing, to thirsts that cannot be quenched. Beside it sits a man, hunched and hollow-eyed, wrapped in a woolen cloak that once bore the badge of a lord's court. The cloth is stained now, moth-bitten and stiff with damp. His fingers move rhythmically, rubbing two stones together, not to spark fire, but to remember. He was once a storyteller, not by profession, but by calling. The villager's memory once lived inside him. Ballads of saints, legends of knights, songs of harvest, love, and sorrow. Now he speaks only to himself. Fragments of tales slip through his cracked lips, broken and jumbled like the stained glass windows of the chapel. There was a boy with wings of wax, and a fire beneath his feet. He murmurs, the children avoid him now, if any remain. But the old know who he is, and some listen, still. Long ago, the people of Senwick strung ribbons through the trees and danced barefoot in the fields. They crowned their daughters with herbs, lavender for purity, rosemary for memory. The baker's wife once led the May procession, her red skirt sweeping over flower petals laid in reverence. That same oak tree now stands bare, its bark scarred with hunger. Carved names crowd its trunk, those who've passed, fled, or been forgotten. Beneath it, the soil is too hard to bury the dead. The ground resists, so they are taken to the hills, wrapped in whatever cloth can be spared, and left for the earth to reclaim at its own pace. The Lord who once ruled this land resides behind iron gates, 3 days east, in a stone manor untouched by famine. His men came in the early weeks, offering grain in exchange for oaths. But when the stores failed, so did the promises. The grain stopped. The men vanished. Rumors ride the wind like crows, that the Lord's hall overflows with salted meats, that the hearths blaze without end, that laughter still echoes in the galleries while Senwick starves. Some dare to believe, others dream of revolt, though dreams require strength, and hope has a high price. The forge is cold now, its chimney choked with ash, its anvil rusted through, but in its belly, beneath a pile of moldy sacks and broken barrels, a woman kneels by the faint glow of a candle stub. Her face is drawn but determined. She once shaped iron beside the blacksmith, once sang while heating steel. Now she boils bones, pig, dog, anything scavenged. The pot hisses faintly, filling the air with the sour taint of desperation. Her child lies nearby, eyes half closed, lips dry, fingers twitching in some fevered dream. She dips a cloth into the broth and presses it to the child's mouth. He does not resist. This is not cooking. This is ritual. This is defiance. The scent of marrow and smoke creeps through the air, mingling with the rot of spoiled rye and the lingering bitterness of old death. Somewhere in the village, a dog howls, or perhaps it is something else, something wild that no longer remembers what it once was. Outside, the storyteller still murmurs. There was a woman who drank the moon. She wore a crown of fire. She walked the road between the dead and the dreaming. His voice wavers, but does not stop. It never stops. Because stories are not just tales, they are shelters, places to keep the soul warm when the world forgets. How the villagers pass him without speaking. They carry hollow eyes, thin limbs, secrets hidden beneath coats too thin for winter. They nod, sometimes, not in kindness, in acknowledgement that he remains, that he remembers. In the chapel, the pews are dusted with frost. The altar cloth is gone. The candlesticks have been melted into spoons or arrowheads. A single painting remains, faded, cracked, but clear. A mother holding a child. The child looks outward, past the viewer, as if already seeing what will come. And still the man outside speaks. There was a kingdom beneath the ice, he says, where wolves bowed to queens, and sorrow had a name. A young woman stops, at the edge of the square, listening. Her face is half covered by a scarf, her eyes rimmed with smoke and sleeplessness. She kneels beside him, places something at his feet, a sliver of dried apple wrapped in cloth. He pauses, nods once, then resumes. She leaves without a word, vanishing into the fog. A bell somewhere, long abandoned, creaks in the wind. It does not ring, it sways. A reminder that time still moves, even here. The man leans back, stone still turning in his hand. The frost thickens, his cloak gathers snow, but he continues. There was a village where the wind forgot how to sing. He whispers, but the earth still remembered its name. And so the morning rises, not in light, but in memory. In voices cracked and quiet, in bones boiling over stone fire, in names carved into bark, Senwick breathes shallowly. The dead are not all gone, and the living are not all lost. And beneath the frozen fields, something waits, not a saviour, not a feast, but perhaps a sound, a name, a story waiting to be told once more. The next chapter lies just beyond the hill, where the wind carries more than cold. It carries the echo of a song that has not been sung in a long, long time. You said bells once rang here, bronze-throated and jubilant. They called the fields to harvest and the faithful to prayer. They rang through warm autumn air, over golden wheat and the laughter of children chasing ribbons through dust. But the bells are silent now, not broken, merely forsaken, forgotten. The rope still hangs in the belfry, limp and fraying, swinging gently with each sigh of wind, like the tail of a dying horse. And the wind does sigh here endlessly. It weaves through the bones of this starving village, Senwick, carrying no sense of bread or meat, only the cold perfume of frost, rot, and fear. Beneath a veil of pale snow, the streets lie still. Houses sag like old women at prayer. Doors remain shut, not for warmth, but from weariness, the kind of weariness that folds itself into the soul and refuses to leave. Near the woods, a boy crouches, barefoot in the snow, his ankles wrapped in torn linen, his breath shallow and rapid. His hands are stained purple from berries too bitter to eat. He's eaten the thorns, too. His lips are cut. The blood tastes like copper. Still, he chews. Behind him, the village disappears into fog, its outlines fading into soft grey smudges. The boy listens, not for voices, there are none, but for silence that might break. A cry, a call, even the rustle of leaves would be a kind of mercy, but there is nothing, just the wind and the distant crack of wood. At home, his sister waits by the fireless hearth. A rosary, missing half its beads, wraps around her fingers like a binding oath. She mutters prayers beneath her breath, not for salvation, but for stillness, for her brother to return, for her mother to wake, for the house to remain standing another night. Their mother does not stir. Beneath layers of blankets and patched cloth, her chest rises and falls in long, uneven intervals. Her skin has taken on a yellow hue, waxen cold. Her body is here, but she is already halfway to somewhere else. The famine did not arrive like a storm. There were no cries, no warnings. It crept in slowly, like rot. First, the rains failed. Then the soil turned sour. The crops grew thin. The river shrank. The Lord's men arrived with promises and grain, and then stopped coming altogether. After that, the sickness came, spreading like smoke. First the weak, then the old, then the ones who had once been strong. The miller's wife was the first to be accused. They said she hexed the soil. Her herbs were burned, her chickens slaughtered. Her trial lasted no more than an hour. The priest stood beside the fire as she screamed. The next morning, her ashes were scattered over the fields. The crops did not return. Senwick turned inward. Doors stayed closed. Neighbours passed one another like ghosts, their eyes empty, their arms wrapped around themselves as though they might hold in the hunger. Children were taught not to speak unless spoken to. Women stopped weaving songs into their chores. Men ceased to gather at the well. In the chapel, the crucifix has slipped sideways on the wall. The Christ figure blackened by years of smoke. The altar is stripped bare. The candles have all been burned. What remains are echoes, the footfalls, of vanished monks, the laughter of weddings, the weeping of the baptized. The priest still comes. He no longer reads from the book. There are no pages left. They were used for fire. He lifts his hands, gives the sign of the cross, and leaves in silence. Outside the chapel, the boy walks back toward the village, cradling something in his hands, an egg, tiny, pale, cracked on one side, but still intact. He found it nestled in a half-collapsed wall near the woods. A miracle, a sign. He holds it like a jewel. A whole meal for one, a bite each for two, enough to slow the unraveling for just one more day. He runs now, barefoot across the snow, heart thudding in his chest, breath burning his throat. The wind catches his hair. The egg is warm against his skin. It is hope, round and fragile and utterly alive. His sister sees him from the window and rises. Her rosary slips from her fingers. She opens the door before he reaches it and catches him in. Her arms he doesn't speak, only opens his palm and shows her. Her eyes fill, not with tears. There are none left, but with something brighter. Wonder, relief, the kind of emotion that has no name in a place like this. She nods and takes the egg. Together they move to the hearth. She lights the last stub of a candle and cracks the egg into a wooden bowl. The yolk pools golden and trembling. They take turns dipping their fingers in. Just a taste, just enough. The bowl is passed between them like a chalice. Their mother stirs for the first time in days. Her eyes flutter open, unfocused. Her lips part. The girl dips her finger in the bowl and presses it to her mother's tongue. The older woman swallows. A sound escapes her. A whisper, soft and slurred, "Where?" The girl answers with the only word that matters, "Here." Outside, the snow falls heavier now. The village slumbers, but not in peace. It slumbers in defiance, a brittle, aching refusal to disappear. Far in the distance, the woods groan. With wind, the trees sway like sentinels, unsure of their loyalty. Wolves howl, not in hunger, but in mourning. And somewhere beneath the snow, the graves shift, making space for what may come next. But for now, there is an egg. A boy, a sister, a breath, and the faintest warmth returning to a house that has known only cold. It is not a feast. It is not salvation, but it is a beginning. And as the candle burns low, its flame dances in the dark like a voice saying, "There is still something left to save." And in that flickering light, the door to the next chapter begins to open, quiet as dawn, soft as mercy, waiting in the silence for someone brave enough to step through. You said the door had been barred for weeks. A crooked beam held it fast across rusted hinges, a final gesture against a world that no longer knocked. The cottage sat at the edge of Senwick, tucked beneath the shadow of the ridge, half buried in snow and grief. Its windows were blind with frost. The air inside was thick, not with warmth, but with memory. And now the door creaked open. It did not burst. It yielded slowly with a shudder of wood swollen by damp and silence. From within, a figure emerged, a woman cloaked in the stitched remnants of 5 other lives. Her sleeves did not match. Her boots were wrapped in twine. Her eyes held a quiet fire that had not yet gone out. She stepped into the cold, like one stepping into sacred ground, cautious, reverent, prepared to bury or be buried. Her name was Mil. Once she had been the healer of Senwick, a midwife, a whisperer of poultices and psalms. She knew the names of herbs in 3 tongues. She knew which roots bled white and which burned like fire. Her hands had ushered life into this world, and once, many years ago, had steadied her own mother's dying breath. But famine is crueler than fever, and hunger forgets the difference between medicine and magic. When the crops failed, they came to her not for salves, but for salvation, for barley that would not grow, for milk that soured in the pail, for children whose limbs grew thin as candle wicks. And when her remedies did not answer, when death came anyway, the murmurs began. She was hidden now, not by choice, but by necessity. Still, something had shifted. This morning, the wind had spoken, not with words, but with change. It carried not the stench of rot, but the sharp, clean bite of ice. A storm was coming, the kind that freezes breath before it leaves the lungs. Mirwin had felt it in her bones, in the ache behind her eyes, and something inside her stirred a knowing, old and unshaken. If I do not go to them now, there will be no one left to go to. She trudged into the village, her staff tapping the frozen stones in a steady rhythm. Eyes watched her from behind. Curtains, children peeked through slats. An old man crossed himself. None opened their doors. At the square, the old well loomed. A ragged scarecrow hung beside it, not to frighten birds, but to warn the living. Strips of cloth had been tied to its arms, each one marking a home that no longer had a fire. Mirwin knelt at the well and placed her hand on its rim. The stone was bitter cold. Her breath misted the air, ghost-like. She closed her eyes and whispered a name, not a prayer, not a spell, but a memory. Then she rose and turned toward the chapel. The doors had warped in their frame, leaning like drunks, but she pushed them open and stepped into the gloom. The smell hit first, mildew old wax bodies that had not been moved in time. The pews were empty. A single child sat near the altar, rocking slowly, clutching a broken doll. Mirwin moved toward her, slowly. Her voice, when it came, was rough with disuse. "Where is your mother?" The girl looked up. Her cheeks were sunken, her lips cracked. "Gone," she said. Mirwin knelt. "Do you know your name?" The child shook her head. "Then we shall." "Choose one," Mirwin said gently. "What do you remember?" The girl thought for a long time. The sound of bells. Mirwin smiled, not with joy, but with recognition. "Then I shall call you Clara." She wrapped the child in a length of her cloak and carried her outside. The snow fell harder now, thicker. It clung to the lashes, to the edges of pain. She walked from door to door, knocking once, twice, and waiting. Most remained closed, but a few opened. Not wide, but enough. A boy with a frostbitten ear, an old woman too weak to lift her firewood, a man who'd lost 2 fingers to rot and was beginning to lose the rest. Mirwin worked without hurry, without fear. She drew warmth from memory. How to make a poultice from pine bark. How to press warmth into a failing limb with heated stones. She tore her cloak into strips and bandaged what she could. She sang low under her breath, not words, just tone, like a lullaby carried across water. The villagers followed her like shadows. They did not speak, they did not thank her, but they followed by nightfall. She had gathered them in the chapel, not for prayer, for shelter. She built a fire from the last of the pews. The heat spread slow, but true. Children curled beside it. The old sat closer than they ever had. The air filled with breathing. Mirwin watched them all, faces flickering. In firelight, none smiling, but none dying. She sat near the flame and took Clara's hand. The girl looked up. "Will we eat?" she asked. "Tomorrow," Merwin said. "Do you promise?" Merwin looked into the flame. "I promise that I will wake with you, and we will try." Clara nodded and rested her head against the older woman's arm. Outside, the snow deepened. The wind screamed against the chapel walls. But inside, there was breath. There was a voice. The healer had returned, not as a miracle, but as a witness, and, as the fire crackled, a bell high in the steeple swayed. It did not ring, but it moved, ever so slightly, as if remembering what it once meant to call the living home. And through the gaps in the chapel roof, snow fell soft. Like absolution, the next morning would bring new cold, new hunger, but for now they were not alone, and in the silence between gusts, a sound could almost be heard. The breath of a village, remembering how to live. Ask ChatGPT. The snow no longer falls. It hovers, as if the sky itself cannot bear to touch the earth. Everything is still, wrapped in the hush of deep winter, as if the world has paused to listen for something it cannot name. In Senwick, silence is not absence. It is presence, thick, intimate, full of things that once were. Beneath that silence, a figure walks, not quickly, not boldly, but with the slow, deliberate steps of someone who knows the weight of each breath. His name is Osric, no longer a boy, not yet a man. His shoulders sag not from age, but from the burden of watching others fall. He carries something wrapped in cloth, careful, cradled. At first glance, one might think it's a loaf of bread or a swaddled child, but it is neither. It is a ledger bound in cracked leather, the ink smudged from hands that shook while writing. This book was once the heart of the village. It belonged to Osric's father, the last reeve of Senwick, who recorded births and deaths, marriages, and disputes, the weight of grain harvested, the number of sheep marked, each line a thread in the tapestry of life. Now, most of the names in it have been crossed out, some gently, others with a line so harsh it tore through the page. Osric enters the old meeting hall. It has not heard voices in months. Dust coats the benches. The central hearth is choked with ash and feathers. He kneels at the center and opens the book, slowly, reverently, as if to read the last rites of a world that no longer recognizes itself. He does not speak, but he begins to write, not numbers, not disputes, but memories. Marta, who laughed at storms, buried by the river. Thane, the cooper's son, who loved birds, gone into the woods and did not return. Lothan, who once made wine from rose hips found beneath the well. He writes not to preserve facts, but to restore presence. Each name called forth again, summoned not in grief, but in refusal to let them vanish. Outside, footsteps crunch the snow. Osric looks up. A girl steps into the hall, face pinched with cold, hair tucked beneath a torn cap. She is no one important, not a daughter of note, but she carries something in her arms, a wooden spoon carved with care, and a crust of stale bread. She places them on the bench beside him, then sits. Her silence is not empty, it is solidarity. Soon others come, one by one. The weaver's widow, the shepherd boy missing 3 toes, the woman who lost all 4 children but still rises to sweep her steps. They bring what little they have, a wool scarf, a broken ladle, The first bird in weeks is found beneath the eaves of the granary, frozen wings spread wide, beak slightly open as if caught mid-prayer. Its feathers are stiff, rimmed with frost, but the eye remains glassy, watching nothing. A boy finds it. Young, perhaps 9 winters old, though hunger has carved the years from his face. He kneels beside it, not out of curiosity, but reverence. In Senwick, even the smallest death is sacred now. He lifts the bird gently, as one might lift a relic, and presses it to his chest from across the square. A woman watches wrapped in a cloak too thin for the hour, her hands tucked deep into its folds. She does not stop the boy. She merely watches her breath ghosting in the morning air, vanishing before it can reach her lips. Above them the sky is pale, not blue, but the washed-out white of old wool left too long in snow. The sun does not shine, it merely exists, veiled behind clouds, as if ashamed to witness what remains. The bell still hangs in the tower, mute. Its clapper was taken in the early days, traded for a sack of barley that never arrived, but the rope remains, frayed, tangled, swollen with ice. No one pulls it now, not because they've forgotten, but because they remember too well. A group gathers near the chapel not to pray, but to decide. There is food hidden deep in the old abbey. Cellar, salted beans, oats sealed in clay. It was meant for the priesthood, for feasts that would no longer come. The villagers know it is there. They've whispered about it for weeks. But the cellar is locked. Heavy wood, iron bands, and the key was last seen on the priest's belt. The priest is gone, walked into the woods 2 nights ago with a psalter and a single candle. Some say he sought a vision. Others believe he simply walked toward silence. The people now stand in the snow, staring at the chapel door. Osric, the reeve's son, is there, his ledger tucked beneath one arm. Merwin, the healer, silent at his side. Alice, clutching her brothers. Hand, eyes hollow with watching too many nights pass without change. Clara, the nameless child, stands barefoot beside her, her broken doll wrapped in wool like a saint's relic. The boy with the bird arrives last. They do not speak right away. In Senwick, words are chosen like seeds, sparingly, and only when the ground is ready to receive them. Osric speaks first. We must decide. No one answers. He opens the ledger. His hand trembles. If we open the cellar now, we may survive until Thor. If we wait, we may lose more. But it was consecrated food, meant for holy rites. The rites are gone, Merwin says softly, and the holy are with them. Still, no one moves. The weight of it hangs there, not just the question, but the ghost of what they once were. A village that believed in feast days, in bells, in God, and yet Clara steps forward. She places her doll on the chapel steps. For him, she says, pointing upward, so he won't mind. It is not theology, it is not doctrine, but it is enough. A man breaks the silence, an old carpenter, his hands cracked and swollen. He approaches the door, takes a chisel from his coat. He begins to work. The iron groans. Wood splinters. No one stops him. When the door falls open, a scent rises stale. Oats, salt, dust, old wine. A smell from another life. It fills the square like incense. They descend into the dark. The cellar is deep. Stone walls slick with moisture. Rows of barrels, crates marked with faded symbols. They move carefully, as if entering a tomb. But there is food, enough for a week, maybe 2, enough to matter. They return above with handfuls, at first beans wrapped in shawls, oats in clay bowls. They do not feast, they ration, measure, divide. That night, for the first time in months, the fire in the chapel hearth is lit. It burns. Low, steady, fragrant with pine and dried rosemary from Meerwind stores. The people gather, seated in silence, bowls warm in their hands. Alice feeds her brother slowly, mouthful by mouthful. Clara falls asleep with crumbs on her lips. The carpenter weeps quietly, wiping his eyes with sawdust-covered hands. The boy with the bird does not eat. He places the creature gently near the hearth, lets it thaw. Then, when he thinks no one is looking, he takes one small feather and tucks it into his pocket. Outside, the wind howls again. But the village breathes, together, slowly. They do not sing, not yet, but someone hums, just a note, a thread of melody. Others join, low, uncertain. It is not a song from the past, not one of feast or harvest. It is a new sound. Born from what remains in the belfry, the rope swings slightly, not pulled, but moved by the shifting of the building beneath it, like the lungs of a sleeping giant, just beginning to stir. The food will not last forever. The storm will come. There is still death to face. But for tonight, there is warmth. There is voice. There is something like a beginning, and as the embers rise into the rafters, they carry with them not smoke, but a memory that even in ruin, even in hunger, even in the rot of what once was, something waits to be rebuilt, and somewhere beyond the forest line, where frost gives way to ash, the first green shoots have already begun to push toward the light. The earth has begun to soften, not fully, not like spring, but just enough that a boot leaves more than a trace. The frost, once unbroken armor, now seeps into mud by midday, then hardens again by night. It is the season between deaths, when things do not live, but do not quite surrender either. In the farthest crook of Senwick, where the cottages lean against one another like bones in a shared grave, a sound begins, not loud, not sharp, a rhythm, soft, deliberate, metal tapping wood. Then silence. Then again, inside a crumbling shed, a girl hammers a nail into a splintered beam. Her fingers are numb but precise. Her name is Elswith. She once spun flax and sang to her younger sister as the wheel turned. Her voice had a clear lilt, like water against stone. That voice is gone now. Her sister too. Only the rhythm remains. She is building something, not with plans or tools, but with fragments. The spine of a broken chair, the lid of an old chest, planks pried from her neighbour's shuttered home. The shape is crude, a frame, 4 legs, a box dot, a coffin, not for her sister. That was weeks ago, buried quickly, wrapped in shawls, a stone for a marker. This one is for a boy she does not know. His body was found near the tree line, curled beneath the roots of an ash tree, limbs stiff with cold, mouth open as if calling for someone who never came. No one claimed him, no one wanted to, but Elswith does. Not out of duty, not from pity, but from the simple belief that no one should vanish without form. Outside, the village stirs, not with bustle, those days are gone, but with small returns. A door opened for light, a bucket drawn slowly from the well, a girl humming beneath her breath while tying herbs to dry dot at the chapel. Meerwind tends to the sick with boiled bark and whispered fragments of forgotten prayers. Osric copies names into the ledger with ink made from ash and snowmelt. Clara feeds a sparrow from her palm, a creature too weak to fly. yet too stubborn to die. And in the square, the bell tower finally gives in to the wind. A great moan, then a groan, then a crash. The bell does not ring, it falls, splinters the stones, cracks the earth. The village gathers around the wreckage. They do not weep, they do not speak, but their eyes say it clearly. It is over. The bell, the symbol of order, of time, of worship, gone. The past has buried itself. Ith arrives late. Her hands are raw. Sawdust clings to her hair. She looks at the broken bell, then turns her eyes to the boy's body, laid nearby under a cloth that she kneels beside him. I built him something, she says. No one responds, but Osric steps forward, lifts one corner of the cloth, and nods. Together, they carry him slowly. Through the village, past doorways where faces peek out and linger. They reach the field beyond the last cottage, where the soil is less cruel. There, they place him in Ellsworth's makeshift coffin, line it with scraps of wool, tuck a carved token into his hand, a bird, crudely shaped from bone. A few words are spoken, not prayers, not rites, just truths. He was cold, he was young, he mattered. They lower him into the shallow earth. The coffin fits him perfectly. The ground resists, but the villagers work with hands blistered and aching until the grave is filled. Someone places the bell's broken clapper atop the mound, not as a mark of faith, but of sound, a promise you were heard. As dusk settles, snow begins again, but this time it feels gentler. Not a burial, but a covering, a hush over something sacred. Back in the chapel, they light the fire again. It catches slowly, then steadies. Children curl beside it. The old sit closer than before. Merwin serves a thin stew made from the last of the roots. Osric reads names from the ledger aloud, not for record, but remembrance. Ellsworth hums. It is not a song of joy. It is not beautiful, but it is alive. Clara takes the bone bird and places it on the chapel shelf, beside the altar's last candle. The flame dances across its pale surface, casting a crooked shadow on the wall, a wing in flight. Outside, the snow continues, but inside a new rhythm grows. Tap, stir, write, sing, the acts of living, stitched together with ritual, no matter how small. Senwick still suffers, still mourns, still hungers, but it remembers, and in remembering, it survives in the days to come. Others will build beside Ellsworth benches, shelves, frames for doors that no longer close. They will carve names into stones, not to mourn the dead, but to anchor the living. The wind will howl, yes, but over time it will carry new sounds. A child laughing, a hammer falling, a name called gently in the night. The village has lost its bell, but not its voice. And somewhere in the distance, beyond snow, beyond famine, beyond silence, a Thor is waiting, not loudly, not urgently, but patiently, and Senwick, stitched together by hands that still remember how to build, begins slowly to listen. The Thor brought more than water. It brought the scent of the buried, of roots long rotted, of fur and bone, of old ash reawakened by melting snow. The ground, soft now and slumping, gave up its secrets without resistance. Graves shifted, doors unsealed, walls wept with the damp of survival. In the western edge of Senwick, where brambles once wove protection around empty homes, a hand breached. The soil, not living, not reaching, just there, pale, still too small, to have belonged to anyone older than 10. The earth had swallowed him in winter. Now spring, cruel in its honesty, returned him. Alice found him while gathering nettles. Her knife had struck something, not root nor stone. When she cleared the moss and frost, she did not scream. She only knelt. She knew the boy, Dallin, the baker's son, vanished in the 2nd month of the famine, said to have gone into the forest, to find his father, who never came back. She brushed the hair from his forehead with her fingers, now blistered from steam and soil. Then she wrapped him in her shawl and lifted him into her arms. He was lighter than she remembered. The people gathered in silence as she entered the village square. Osric came with his ledger. Merwin brought rosemary and oil. Ellsworth offered a small wooden box containing the last nail she'd saved for a coffin. But Alice refused the box. No wood, she said. He should go back to the ground. Nothing between him and what made him. They dug not far from the old bell, now shattered, its bronze limbs splayed like a broken beast. Around them, the village watched. Clara held her doll. The boy who'd once carried a sparrow now cradled a rabbit, gaunt and shivering but breathing. Alice knelt beside the grave and whispered to the boy, "We didn't forget you." It was a lie they had, but lies spoken in love carry their own truth. As they covered the body with earth, the sun broke through, thin and hesitant. It touched the rooftops, turned the melting snow into mist, lit the broken glass in the chapel, windows until they shone with all the colors of memory. Later, Osric placed a stone on the grave and wrote the boy's name beside it, not in ink, in soot mixed with boiled wine and ground charcoal. The villagers stayed there longer than usual. No one spoke, but something shifted like breath released after too long held. That night they met again in the chapel. The fire burned low but steady. The ledger lay open on the altar. "We must choose," Osric said. "What we become now," Merwin leaned forward. "Not what we were. What we protect," Ellsworth added. "What we give back, a child." One of the few left stood and said, "We give names." It seemed too small to matter. But it WASN, single quote. So they began again, not with grain or weapons, not with trade, with names. They walked the village with the ledger in hand, knocking on each door, asking who lived here, who was lost, who remains. They scratched entries into the pages with sticks dipped in soot. When the ink ran dry, they used blood, not from harm, from fingers pricked, from cracked lips, from places where the skin had already broken. Names filled the pages like prayers. Brian, who carved spoons from Ashdot lira, who sang in the field and wore yellow ribbons. Gareth, who died with a smile because he was not alone. They read them aloud at dusk, each name followed by a single beat of silence. Then the next. It became ritual, a chapel not of saints, but of memory, a graveyard not of sorrow, but of witness. And in the weeks that followed, things began to grow, slowly, reluctantly, but undeniably. A patch of nettles thickened behind the smithy. The herbs Merwin had scattered in secret began to push green fingers through the thawing earth. The old apple tree at the edge of the fields, long thought dead, showed a single bud. The people noticed. They did not hope, but they watched. And watching is its own kind of faith. One night, Ellsworth brought something to the chapel, wrapped in cloth, laid gently on the altar. It was a bell, small, bronze, unmarked. "I found it," she said, "buried in my father's tools. I think he meant to save it." They touched it, one by one. And then, for the first time in half a year, a sound rang through Senwick, not loud, not commanding, but clear and pure and pure and whole. The sound of a name being remembered, the sound of life, not shouting, not weeping, but beginning again, and somewhere beyond the hills, where green had not yet returned, a wolf lifted its head and turned away, asked ChatGPT at dawn. A strange light rolls over Senwick, not the gold of spring, nor the cold silver of frost, but something in between, like the inside of a shell. It touches the rooftops first, where thatch hangs ragged, like tired hair, then spills over the fields, where nothing has grown in months. It is not warmth, but it is not indifference either. It feels like permission, or forgiveness by the old forge, long dead and half collapsed. A figure stands, shoulders wrapped in a coat of stitched furs, hands blackened with soot. The blacksmith's daughter, now the blacksmith in name alone, watches the light without. Blinking, her name is Theda. She has not struck iron in half a year, not since her father vanished during the second freeze. But this morning she builds a fire. It takes time. The coals are stubborn, and the bellows are torn, but she does not hurry. The flame is coaxed, not commanded, fed with slivers of birch, bark and the broken legs of a stool once used by her mother. When it catches, she does not smile, only nods. She lays a single horseshoe in the coals, not to make it new, only to make it hot. Across the square, Osric opens the ledger again. The names fill its pages like a tide coming in. Last night, they added 3 more, 1 from memory, 2 from whispered confessions. No one questions who deserves to be written. If they were loved, they are recorded. If they were hated, they are wrecker. Now gold returns. Promises, too. A choice unfolds before them to leave, to begin again elsewhere, or to remain, to lift what little remains from the dust and call it home. The villagers gather, not to vote, but to listen. They speak in low voices, faces lit by the morning sun that now climbs, strong and sure, over the chapel's roof. Some want to go, to follow the rider, to seek cities not hollowed by famine. Others speak of roots, of graves dug by hand, of bells buried but not silenced. Els stands. This place has already died once, she says, and we stayed. She looks around. What we build now will not be what was lost, but it will be ours. Theda steps forward next. She holds the reheated horseshoe. I made this today, she says simply. It's the first thing forged in this village since autumn. Let it be the last thing we leave behind. Osric closes the ledger. Let anyone who must go, go with blessing, he says. But let those who stay remember, survival is not the end of the story. It is the beginning. That evening they hold a feast, not a true feast, but the largest meal in months, root stew, a few precious grains, bread made with more hope than flour. They eat together, they sing, not the old songs, but the ones they remember, only halfway filled with hums and pauses and laughter. When lines are forgotten, they light every candle, they ring the small bell. Ellsworth found, they plant the moss from Clara's garden beside the chapel. They place the horseshoe above the door, and when the rider departs the next morning, 6 villagers go with him. 3 young men, 2 mothers with infants, and the boy who once found the frozen sparrow. His rabbit now hops in a sack at his side. The rest remain, not because they are too broken to leave, but because they have begun to build something that will not fit in a pack. The next day, the wind changes. It carries not the scent of rot or rust, or damp wool, but of turned earth, of bees, of thawed bark, of something living. The snow melts faster now. The paths begin to show, and deep beneath the chapel, in the cracked foundation stone, the roots of a vine twist softly toward the light. Night falls like a hush over Sentwek, not sudden, but slow, as if darkness is reluctant to disturb what flickers below. The fires burn in fewer hearths now, but they burn. Smoke drifts upward, scented faintly with pine resin and dried sage, curling against the blackening sky like forgotten songs returning home. Inside the chapel, shadows stretch long across the stone floor. The windows are patched with cloth, and where stained glass once stood, the wind now presses gently, testing the seams. A single candle remains lit on the altar. It is small, nearly gone, but its flame dances, like it remembers what it means to last. Clara stands before it. She is older now, not in years, but in posture, in the way her hands rest on the altar, not asking for miracles, but steadying herself against what must come. Next, her doll lies beside the flame, stitched and restitched, its stuffing made from old linen and hope behind her. The villagers gather fewer than once, but more than survived the first winter. Alice wraps a shawl around a coughing child. Merwin leans against the wall, her face drawn but calm. Ellsworth carries a satchel filled with charcoal and worn tools. And Osric, now keeper of more than just the ledger, stands with his hands clasped. Behind his back, watching the flame, he opens the ledger, but he does not speak. Tonight, another voice rises. It is Theda, the blacksmith's daughter, her face lit by firelight, her voice rough from smoke and years to silent. It has been 2 years, she says, since the first frost, since the bell stopped ringing, since the food vanished, and with it, so many of us. She pauses, eyes moving across the faces. We were not chosen to survive. We were not spared by favor. We remained because we remained. And now we choose. A murmur moves through the chapel, not of fear, but of recognition, of readiness. Osric steps forward. We have names, he says. We have stories. We have soil that remembers our feet. It is time to mark the boundary between what was and what will be. He unrolls a parchment, the only one left unmarked in the ledger, at the top. One word, covenant. Below it, to rebuild not what was but what must be. He lays it on the altar. One by one they come forward, not to sign names, most cannot write, but to leave marks, a thumbprint in soot, a symbol carved in the wax, a token left behind, a spoon, a feather, a twist of dyed thread, a stone from a child's pocket. Each offering is small, but together they form a new record, not of who ruled, but of who endured. Clara steps up last. She takes the candle and lets a single drop fall onto the parchment. It sears slightly, then settles into the wax. Her voice, barely a whisper, "This is ours." The villagers do not cheer. They do not shout. They bow their heads. Outside, the moon breaks through a veil of cloud, spilling silver across the village square. The chapel door swings gently in the wind, not from rot, but from breath. At the edge of the village, a sound stirs, wheels, wooden wheels over thawed earth. A cart arrives, pulled by an ox, led by 2 strangers, wrapped in cloaks of green. Their faces are worn, their hands blistered, but they carry tools, seeds, salt. We heard of a place that still speaks its dead, one says. We thought that might be a place worth planting something. Senwick watches, then welcomes. They lead the strangers inside, offer water, bread, a place near the fire. No questions asked, the chapel fills with warmth, not of fire, but of decision. Tomorrow the ground will be broken for a new well. A new roof will be raised over the forge. Clara and the other children will plant their moss, their weeds, their stolen seeds in the dirt behind the chapel. No one knows if the vines will grow, but they will try. They will gather each evening in the chapel, not for worship, but for weaving, for stitching torn fabric, for writing names, for keeping the silence sacred. They will ring the bell. The small one Ellsworth cast herself. Each time a task is finished, not to summon, but to celebrate. In time travelers will come and ask, what is this place? And the people of Senwick will answer, this is where the famine ended. Not when the food returned, not when the priest came back, not when the roads were cleared, but when we remembered each other, when we chose to remain, when we turned from mourning to making, and when we made a covenant with no parchment but our hands, and no witness but the wind, and in the stillness of the chapel, where the candle finally flickers out, another flame is born, not of wax, but of will, a fire that says, we are not only what we suffered, we are what we rebuild. You said, there is a sound in the forest, low rhythmic, like breath drawn through hollow wood. The trees, still bare, sway gently under the weight of early spring, their limbs creaking like old bones learning how to move again. Between them, mist curls at the roots, pale and cautious, like something once hunted, now searching for home. A path emerges, not one made by tools, but by feet. Many feet, worn, slow, deliberate. A procession, quiet and steady, snakes its way through the underbrush. At its head, Osric walks, the ledger clutched in his hands, wrapped in cloth to keep it from the damp. Behind him, Meerwin carries a flask of oil and a pouch of herbs. Ellsworth brings a small wooden crossbeam, carved with vines and birds. Clara holds a lantern, the flame inside swaying with each step. They are not fleeing, they are returning, not to escape the famine. That chapter has closed, but to face what they had not dared to touch while survival required forgetting. Today, they go to the mass grave. It lies beyond the southern rise, near the stream that once fed the village's orchards. It is not marked, except by a ring of stones, and the leaning branches of an old yew tree. Here, in the worst of the hunger, the bodies were laid, one atop another, in silence, in haste. No prayers, no records, no farewells, just earth over flesh, and the hope that one day someone would come back. And now they have. As they reach the edge, no one speaks. The stream babbles softly nearby. A bird calls once, then falls quiet. Osric kneels and unwraps the ledger. He opens it to a blank page, then looks up. We won't know them all. Meerwin nods. We don't have to. One by one, the villagers step forward. Not many, just those who could carry the memory. They place objects on the stones, tokens, a button, a ribbon, a wooden toy, a piece of parchment with a name only half remembered, a crust of bread, not for the dead to eat, but so the living remember they once hungered to. Ellsworth drives the crossbeam into the ground with a stone. It leans, slightly imperfect, like all things left in the weather too long. She ties a strip of linen around it, then places her hand flat against the wood. We name them, she says. Osric begins to write. He does not guess. He does not assume. He writes what is true. Those who were buried here died with us. Those who lie beneath this tree fed the roots of our future. Their names may be lost, but their cost is carved into every nail we drive, every seed we plant, every breath we still take. He dips his quill again, today. We remember not as historians, but as kin. Clara lights her lantern and hangs it from the crossbeam. The glow flickers, pale in the morning mist, casting trembling shadows across the stones. A new ritual begins. They take turns reading aloud from the ledger, not names, but lines, fragments, words like threads sewn into silence. Brother, I couldn't find you. Mother, I still taste your stew when the wind smells of time. Whoever you were, I slept above you, and you held me through the floor. Each voice a stitch, each sentence a shelter. They do not stay long. There is still work to do. Soil to turn, children to feed, walls to patch before the next storm. But before they leave, they place stones. Small, flat, each one pressed into the soil by hand. No carvings, no symbols, only weight to say, you are here. To say, we know. As they walk back toward Senwick, the mist begins to lift. The trees glisten with dew. The yew tree behind them stands still, not solemn, but dignified. As if nodding in approval, the village greets them with smoke curling from hearths and the sound of distant hammering. Theda is repairing the forge roof. Alice is teaching to girls how to braid rope from flax. Near the chapel, a young boy coaxes bees into a hollow log. Life, stubborn as weeds, has taken root again. That night, Osric adds a line to the covenant. Scroll in the chapel. We shall carry the unnamed, not because it makes the pain smaller, but because it keeps the story whole. Later, Merwin places the pouch of herbs on the altar, and for the first time in over a year, incense is burned. The scent is soft, rosemary and sage, smoke and salt, drifting through the chapel, curling round the rafters like breath returning to lungs. They sleep better that night, not because the world is healed, but because they have acknowledged the wound, and in the darkness, in the places where no fire reaches, the soil continues its slow, silent work, drawing nourishment from what was buried, feeding what might still grow, and the stars above Senwick shine, cold and quiet, witnesses, guardians, reminders that even in the blackest night there is memory, there is light, there is a path that leads back, not to what was lost, but to what must be honored.